Make complete leather patterns without ever pulling out a piece of paper. Today, I'm going to show you how to use Fusion 360 to create this basic bag pattern using its sheet metal environment. Alright, let's try and have a little bit of fun today. I was playing around with making this little handbag pattern, and I really liked the process, and it seemed like something that if you were just getting started with working with sheet metal in Fusion, that this would be a good one for you to give a try to. So let's get started. I'm going to create a new project here, and I like to start with the layout grid on, so I'm going to come down here and turn that on. I'm going to come to the sheet metal environment, and in here's where most of the things are going to happen today. Get my browser out there. That's how we're going to navigate ourselves around, so I really like to have that open. This one doesn't actually require you editing the sheet metal rules a whole lot, so you can just go ahead and create a new component and select steel inches. And if you look, that's about 10 thousandths thick, so that's probably about 5 to 7 ounce leather. Click OK, and we've got ourselves a new component. So this component, I'm going to go ahead and title, that's going to be the bottom of our bag. And I'm going to start creating a sketch to make that shape. So this is kind of an oval shaped bag. So we're going to come in here and use ellipse. Select the center point. Lets you stretch it out a distance. In this case, I'm going to make it a foot, 12 inches. This is the angle. You can just click that and then stretch it upward. And I'm going to make that 7 inches, kind of makes a nice oval. Hit enter to finish that. And I'm still going to go ahead and do a few more things on this before we turn that into a oval shaped piece of leather. So I'm going to create a stitch hole, and I want to do that right here on the edge so that I can start making that shape go around there. I'm just going to go ahead and put one there using the circle command, 0.05 for a stitch hole. You can use whatever size you want, of course. And I'm going to sketch dimension. I usually hit D, and the dimension between a few points, 0.125, and I use that for just about all my spacing. 0.125. There we go. So we're going to do a 1/4 inch stitch, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and the last thing I'm going to do is, since this is a symmetrical bag, I'm going to create a line right across the middle here. There we go. And you know what, I'm going to go ahead and create one right in the middle here as a mirror line. And just for good measure, because everybody's project is going to be a little bit different depending on the size that you're working with, is that I'm going to create and mirror that shape across this line. There we go. So create and mirror, select your little circle, and now we've got a hole on each side. I'm going to use that as the start and stop points. Go ahead and hit finish sketch, and you could come into your home view here. It makes it nice and easy to extrude with. Now all we have to do is hit flange, and we can select the body that we want to turn into a flange. It already knows the thickness, and since we didn't select these little circles, the holes are already going to be in there. There we go. So that's body one, the bottom. So now we can use the same technique we're used to of creating a path pattern. So a create pattern, pattern on path. And this one's going to let us select the inside face of our piece there, just in case it was set to something else. Make sure it's set to face. And then the path is going to be that line right there. So these shapes are going to go in this direction, and I like my stitching to be a specific spacing. You guys can measure your stitching forks and see what spacing you guys are used to using, but mine are at 0.25. So we changed from extent to spacing, entered 0.25, and here I'm going to go ahead and guess how many stitches are along here. Let's say there's probably, 50 of them. I'm going to zoom out and look. It looks more like 60 of them. There we go. So you see it doesn't follow the line. We don't want it in orientation identical. We want to follow that path direction that we were using. There we go. I'm going to make 61 of them. And I can see that that one doesn't line up with my last hole. So here's where I kind of figured out a new technique. Now we've got the number of stitches we want, and we know we want it exactly 0.25, but that's in a perfect world. So let's come back down here to extent, and it's going to give us our little arrow back. And that arrow lets us pull this back and forth until we can get that to the perfect spacing, or it really is going to line up where we want it. And then to see what it was, you can come back to spacing, and it's going to have it right there. So that's a really kind of a convenient way to put that together. Alternatively, I think you could probably stretch it out further from the other stitch, but that looks like a really convenient way to do it. And I'm going to leave that last one out. There we go. So now we've got some stitch holes that they just match up really nice along that surface. And let's work on creating our other two pieces so that we can get those stitch holes to line up. Now I'm going to come back up here to my main body, and I'm going to create another component. So you could say create new component. Steel inches is fine, unless you changed your rule to something else. It should be there. And now it kind of grays out our component. So I'm going to use this outside edge as my flange line. And just so that I'm working at this component, I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. I'm going to put it right on that surface, and I'm going to P for project, just that line, and hit OK. There we go. So now I've got something that's really inside that part, and I don't have to worry about the other pieces. And hit finish sketch, create our flange. This time we're just going to select that line. Go ahead and start pulling it up. And here you can turn back on the visibility for that other body. And come in here and just make sure that it's set to the right side. If I had this down here to side 2, so it would be inside that. So side 1's what I'm looking for. And for my height here, just to make it look good, I think I'm going to go with about 13 inches. But that's up to you guys with your pattern. This is really just to help you create your own patterns, not so that you can have this one same bag that I decided to make this morning. There we go. So we've got our piece here, and it's kind of just made us a tube for half of our leather bag. So I've got a little trick here that I can show you for how to create some cuts through there to make the handle happen. You could create a sketch, put it on this surface, and slice right through here. But when it does it, it's going to make it so that those cuts are at an angle, and it's not going to be as perfect as it could be. So this isn't really too hard, even if you're new to this. I want to actually just pull out and extrude one of these pieces. So I'm going to hit E for extrude. I'm going to click on that surface, and I'm going to pull it out 1 inch. There we go. So we've just got this funny little thing kind of coming off the top of our part here, but this is the fun part that makes this a little easier. Now we can say unfold. And this is different than creating a flat pattern, keep in mind. Unfold is going to let you select a stationary entity, this little funny flap that we created, and we're going to unfold all bends. So now it's really flattened that thing out, and it's going to let us create a sketch on it while it's stretched out that stays when you go back to the folded up part, unlike if you had modified it while it was in a flat pattern. So, same as before, create a sketch, and this is where you can get creative with whatever your shape is. Again, this is just so that I can show you the idea of how to do it. I liked some little circles here, seemed like it was a kind of a fun way to create a handle. I'm just kind of freestyling some stuff out here. Not any specific size. And kind of just a random shape here. I'm going to start trimming some of that stuff away. There we go. That doesn't look very good, so I'm going to come in here and change some of those up. Make that kind of fun little curved pattern there. And do the same thing on that side. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And now I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to select those as my individual surfaces. So I'll hit Finish Sketch, hit E for Extrude, and let's go ahead and cut those pieces away again. I'm going to hit the drag back so that it cuts through it. But you know, if you were thinking you were going to change your thickness, you could say Distance to Object and click on the back of that surface so that it would change for you. There we go. So now we've got our kind of handbag pattern with this funny little thing coming off of it. Don't worry about that. We're going to click Refold Faces, and it folded it back up. So now we've got it sitting there. We've got a nice curved handbag handle and this weird thing coming back off of here. So we're just going to go ahead and take that away again by hitting E for Extrude. Select that surface, drag it backwards, and let's say -1. There we go. So now that funny little thing is gone, and we've got a pretty nice, clean looking pattern so far. And let's create these stitches that are going to stitch this thing together. So I'm going to create a sketch while I'm in this component that's going to be on the surface that's looking at the edge. And it's right in the middle, but that doesn't really matter because we're just going to be able to use this as some reference. So I'm going to hit P for project. And there is a menu for all of these, but if you get used to these keys, it sure does help. And that same thing where we're going to create a stitch, 0.05, enter, dimension it, 0.125, and 0.125. There we go. And now I can create this stitch in a little bit different way. We used the solid face pattern for this, but I want this to come through both faces at once, so I'm going to go ahead and do it while it's in the sketch. I'm gonna, I think in this case, draw a line. See how it snaps to the middle right there with the little triangle? I like to create some mirror lines so that I can mirror across surfaces easier. Select that little thing, and let's bring it up to the top without having to put any dimensions in. There we go. Now we got another circle up there so that we can make sure our stitching lines up perfect. If you have a first stitch and a last stitch, you're really going to be able to make sure your pattern lines up good. Rectangular pattern. Come down here and really do zoom in on this. Make sure you select this and not the point in the middle. Select that. We're going to be going in this direction. We want it to be, so you can see at distance, this is the distance for this direction. Down here, that's the distance for that direction in the quantity. So if you're wanting to increase your quantity, you know, that's the where you want to do it there. I want that to spacing. And my 1/4 inch stitch, 0.25. So now we can come up here and see where it lines up. Well, that was just a guess. Let's try 35. Maybe 30. Pretty close, because if I had 37 of them, it's going to go right over it. So let's go ahead and do that same technique. We're getting this to line up just right. Extent, and drag that circle over your other circle. And you're going to get a, you know, a pretty nice round piece there. Switch it back to spacing. You can actually see what the number is there. But we want one less stitch, so that's going to change a little bit. There we go. So now we've got our stitches that line up just right. Go ahead and hit OK. And now those are just circles on a sketch. So we're going to have to actually extrude those through, but this is where the fun part starts too. We're going to finish that sketch, and I'm going to actually open up my menu for this component. I'm going to shut off the body. It's going to make it a lot easier to just select a window over all these pieces. I'm going to hit E for extrude, turn back on that body, and here's our sketch down here. Now when it's not cutting through something, it's just going to make some funny little pegs. You know, I think that's going to look pretty good. So we're going to do a symmetric extrusion, and when we drag that through it, boom, it turns into red cutaways. And yeah, that looks like it should line up pretty nicely. So go ahead and hit OK. It'll shut off the visibility for that sketch. And now we have our first set of stitches. So now we can do that second set of stitches along the bottom here to line up with those. And we've already got our first hole to create the pattern with. So let's go ahead and create another pattern with it. Pattern along path. That hole there. Select the path, which is that little arc we've been using for all of them. Drag that out in the direction I want to go. I'm going to set that to spacing because we like our 1/4 inch stitches here in America. There we go. And I think this was 60 stitches, if I do recall from our last one. And it's not going to line up, so I'm going to say path direction. And now I can come over here and kind of see where everything lines up. So that doesn't look like it lines up perfect. So I can do the same technique where I'm dragging my extent line back and forth until it lines up. So instead of spacing, set that to extent. And I could line up that last hole there to really get a nice clean distance. And let's say spacing, and I need one less hole, so there we go. So that should, no, looks like I need one more. You know, take the time to actually look and see that you got the right number of stitches. I'm going to need full 60. All right, let's go ahead and create that pattern one more time. Ah, you know what? That is it right there. Check that out. All right, you see how I didn't get the bottom to line up? Of course, I always forget a little something when I'm creating these pieces. I'm going to come back here and edit that because, well, that didn't line up. See, I actually want a two-sided extrusion that lets me come down an extra 0.1, not 0.2, 0.1. That's going to line up with the bottom there. And, you know, I feel like that was where my chain reaction went wrong, and now those stitches should line up quite a bit smoother there. All right, so let's go ahead and create that pattern. Pattern on path. Select that pattern, or the hole, the stitch surface. Select the path. There we go. I am going to need to be path direction. Set the extent to spacing. My distance, 0.25. My quantity is going to be 60. And we can come around here and see how it lines up. Well, that looks like it lines up pretty darn good. But let's add one more and see how close it could be. Oh, yeah, so it's just a little bit less. I'm going to change that to 549. There you go. Now it lines up really good. Go ahead and drop that one back down to the last stitch so you don't have a second hole there. And now we've got a nice even stitch pattern. I'm glad I caught that little piece, but you see how you can just go back into your timeline anytime you've had an issue and just update everything as you go. Ah, yeah, that looks like it lines up perfect. You know, that went really smooth that time. All right, so now we've got our piece with our stitches all the way around it. It's cut away, but it's really only half a bag. So let's show you this kind of cool way to get this thing into a whole bag. So I'm going to start with the bottom. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to come back into the solid environment. So this might be the first time you switched between them. And here I'm going to create a mirror. And there is still a mirror in the other environment, but I'm going to select this entire piece here, this body. I'm going to make it say body. Select that body. And then the mirror plane is just that thing right in the middle. Hit OK, and now we've got two bodies. We're going to say combine up here, or modify, and then combine. And that's going to let us select these two bodies and join them as one. And now you can see there is just one body there in your bodies. And so now we've got our nice solid bottom, but that's because we wanted that one component. If you remember from any of my beginning leatherworking tutorials, I talked about how you really do want each piece of leather to be a component. So we're going to come back to this one right here, and we're going to copy it. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to come back up here to my main assembly and say paste. So now we've got our little extra piece here, and we can go ahead and flip it around to a 180 and drag it over until it lines up a little bit further over. Zoom in and check that. You can kind of but again, that's not going to really affect your pattern. That's more for the visual rendering of it. All right, so now both of these are the same exact piece. They're a copied pattern, so a change you make to one is going to happen on the other. So now we've got ourselves a bag. Hopefully my mistakes along the way might have helped you problem solve mistakes that you might be making along the way. You know, I think that this is pretty much the gist of the bag creation. So hopefully this was helpful for you. You know, I was having fun with making this. I just wanted to share it with you guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like so that I'll be enthusiastic about doing it in the future. And leave a comment in the comment section if you need any help with putting your project together or if you had any issues along the way with the tutorial. And hopefully this was helpful. I'll see you guys for the next tutorial. And as always, stay creative.